to say is karibuni sana, feel welcome, feel at home, let us engage. Thank you very much. Owe, back to you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Owenkosi Sikudla, and I will be moderating today's speaker series. We are here for our speaker series titled Women in Male-Dominated Fields, and I hope you are all excited. I have 6 panelists with me today, and we are very excited and very grateful to have them here. We have Nomfundo Mulina, who is a universal health coverage analyst at CHAI. We have Nondombi Dudu, a clergy woman. We have Fezousha Kumalo, who's a health researcher, and Mali Kai Kai, who is a diligence manager. Linda Zwane, who is the head of data and analytics at Standard Bank Eswatini, and Anna Claude, who is an architect. We have so many questions and we have so much to find out from these wonderful women, and I hope you are all ready as well. Please remember to mute, and I hope you also know that we will be recording the speaker series just so that you are able to go back and watch this Zoom again in your own time. Also, do know that there is going to be a question and answer session at the end. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat and we will get to them soon. And may you also remember to change your name to your full name, and as well as the year you graduated from WK if you are an alum. But if not, please just change your name to your full names and that will be perfectly fine. Thank you. So let us get into it. I am absolutely so excited. And the first questions I have are for Nondombi Dudu. Thank you so much, Reverend, for joining us. We hope you are well. So my first question is, how do you handle difficult or controversial topics in your work as a clergy woman, and what strategies have you found to be most effective?
So, I mean, I think that well, first of all, hi, everybody. And when they asked us to say what year we graduated, I kept trying to make mine closer to today. So I started off at 97 and then realized that actually it was 77. So, yeah. But in dealing with controversial subjects, I am one of those people who is actually very upfront. So I believe that you take the bull by the horns and start the conversation rather than trying to beat around the bush or trying to make it not seem controversial. I mean, the very ordination of women has been controversial in the church and continues to be controversial. And so in having conversations even about that, I have asked people, well, what would be your reason for not wanting women to be ordained? And then you have people having to come up with things that make sense, but often as they come out of their mouths, they realize how ridiculous the things are. Like we had somebody say that, well, men won't be able to concentrate if women are at the altar because there'll be all these sexual things going through their minds. And I'm like, so how have women sat in the congregation all these years and not jumped on the men who are at the altar? What does that say about men that in church their minds would go to sex if the woman is at the altar? So but for me, it is bring the conversation straight to the topic and let people hear themselves and hear their thoughts about that particular issue.
Thank you so much. That's very insightful. Next question is for Linda. How do you navigate avoiding bias and stereotypes in your workplace as a woman?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I giggle at that question because it's definitely not possible to avoid stereotypes. They are everywhere. And the thing about bias, the very thing about bias is that you just don't know you have it until you're confronted with it. So in much a similar line to Mageno Ndombi, you know, it's really just about confronting the question, letting the question come to the fore, and letting people listen to themselves. I'm fortunate enough that in the data space, we also have a saying about in God we trust, everyone else bring data. So that's one of the things that you can do when you're confronted with biases. Okay, what is informing that, you know, have those direct conversations. But I think really I'm reminded, when I consider this, I'm reminded of that Toni Morrison quote about the function of racism being to distract. And so it's really just about, you know, having a laser sharp focus, not letting these conversations, especially stereotypes, bias is a little bit tricky to work with, but not letting stereotypes overtake any conversation, you know, direct it, address it directly, but not for too long. Focus on the work, focus on staying on course, and focusing on delivery.
Thank you so much. Those are words of wisdom, certainly. Nomfundo, how have you worked to incorporate equity and social justice considerations into your work on universal health coverage? And what strategies have you found to be most effective in addressing health disparities?
Thanks for the question. Oh, hi, everyone. It's great to be with WK family, friends, and community. Firstly, let me just state categorically that anything that I express here is my own opinion and not a reflection of my organization. First, to start with the definition of UHC, universal health coverage. When we speak about universal health coverage, there are three considerations. The first being that people get the health care they need. The second is that the healthcare that they need is of good quality. And then the third consideration is that whatever they seek, it does not have any financial hardship on them. So it doesn't result in any catastrophic cost. So if you go to the hospital, you don't want to choose between buying pills and, you know, buying dinner. So those are all three considerations that we take into account. And these three considerations are based on really social determinants of health. So where you were born, how much money you have, all these items that are sort of outside of the healthcare space, but actually do affect your healthcare access. What we've done in our work, or what I've done in my career especially, is to try and remove any access barrier. So whether that's user fees, whether that's like community levies, ensuring that people aren't turned away from healthcare because of those items. And then it's also strengthening what we call primary healthcare systems. So these are really small clinics in hard to reach areas. So we don't want you to spend too much money, you know, trying to get to a hospital in an urban setting. We want to make sure that whatever's closest to you actually has enough capacity to serve you in the way that you need to be served. So it's all these social determinants that we try and incorporate in our work to ensure that we improve access, and that becomes our social justice work.
Thank you so much, Mfundo. Fezo, how do you navigate avoiding bias and stereotypes in your workplace as a health researcher?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Owengosi, for the question. So lovely to see everyone here. Similarly to Linda's response, you can't really avoid bias in the health research space. And I'm going to talk from the lab perspective, but also from the public health perspective. So in the lab perspective, the one that glared out to me is the stereotyping that comes with being a woman, for example. You're always the person that probably made a mistake, or the person that probably didn't do something right, or, you know, overlooked in conversations. And that's just how you navigate the space. You deal with that. You find the situation to be like that. But how I have dealt with it myself is I am like blind to the bias around me. I show up knowing that I'm already expected to fit into certain categories, and I just continue doing my thing and working as hard as I can. And that's the other thing about being a woman in these spaces. You need to work extra hard to meet the level of your male counterparts. So that's really what I've been doing. I work extra hard.
Thank you so much. And the next question is for Mali. What inspired you to pursue a career in due diligence, and what do you find most rewarding about this work?
Hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I see some familiar faces, so I'm really happy about that. Sibs, hi Sibs, Morgello, Sita, Ms. Heisman, Mr. Storer, I think you were here. I think you're still here, Miss Josephine. So I'm really excited that, you know, to see all those faces. And if I miss anyone, you know, please forgive me. So to answer the question, how did I get into due diligence work? So I actually got into this role most really recently, since January. But I would say generally I got into the energy space since 2014. So I was based in Washington before, where I worked as an analyst for a natural gas exporting firm in Washington, DC, Venture Global LNG. And today they're one of Miss Donko. And today they're one of the biggest exporters of natural gas. And then I recently moved to Berlin, well, in 2020 to do my master's. And I currently work for utility scale solar developer that's based in Berlin. So, and that's how I started to work as a due diligence manager. And what that really entails is working with the different stakeholders, whether it's whether we're trying to raise financing or selling one of the projects, just to make sure that you know, all the projects are aligned and we're getting the value we're creating with the different, whether it's, you know, again, raising funds or selling projects. So that's kind of how I got involved in due diligence work. But what attracted me to the energy sector was I wanted, after I graduated from St. Lawrence University in 2014, don't do the math, I wanted to, you know, work in an industry that, you know, I would have a lot of impact, but also coming from Sierra Leone also, where, you know, there's a big energy crisis, and, you know, Africa in general. I wanted to definitely get involved in an industry that would, you know, directly touch that. And I found that in the energy sector, and I quickly learned that, you know, it's very much male dominated. So that's been my whole experience, and the way I've navigated that. I mean, it's all that I've known, and what, for me, it served me a lot, I would say. Just, you know, being in an industry that's not as maybe that's maybe male dominated, in the way I was able to use that to my advantage, and I can go into the details about that. But for me, generally, like, it served me a lot. Just once I understood, like, okay, I'm a minority here in so many different ways, and I just try to use that to my advantage as much as possible.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anna, what role do you see for architecture in promoting social justice and equity? And how have you worked to integrate these considerations into your design work?
Well, I think architecture plays an enormous role in creating equity and social justice. And I think it certainly should. And it seems like most of the time architects forget about that and forget about the impact of the building on society. You know, the ramifications of a badly designed building, or a building that's ill-considered, not just for the present time, but going forward, has, you know, there are so many negative outcomes. In terms of my contribution to such, I think it's quite a difficult one for me to answer, because I wouldn't say that I'm very sort of strictly speaking a social architect. However, I do have a great interest in sustainability and environmentalism. And I think when you look at that word, when you look at the word sustainability on its own, it's not just about environmentally conscious design. It's about sustainable societies. So it goes further than just a building. It goes into communities and how people contribute to and live in an environment that the architect has ultimately designed and made. And on top of that, I think just looking back historically at the work that I have done, a lot of it has referenced or come directly from my father's work, which was very much social architecture. He was involved in doing a lot of work in rural KwaZulu-Natal, a lot of pro bono work. And I got involved quite heavily in a lot of that, those projects, quite a few projects in sort of the 80s and the 90s when I first started my early days in my career. Yeah, and so those sort of things have always interested me. And I do see the importance of social considerations is hugely important. I think that's about all I can say about that for now.
Thank you so much. A quick reminder to the audience watching, please do know that this Zoom meeting is being recorded and the recording will be made accessible in a few weeks. And also there is a question and answer session afterwards. So if you have any questions, feel free to put some in the comments and we will definitely see them and we will answer them eventually. And yes, also please remember to change your names to your full names as well as the year you graduated if you're a former student. And if you haven't, please just change your, rename yourself to your full name and we will be good to go. The next set of questions, Reverend Nondombi, what challenges do you believe still exist for women in the clergy and what steps do you think need to be taken to overcome these challenges?
So, I mean, I would say that some of the biggest challenges are that our structure is a structure that was designed for men. So the work of a clergy person was thought of with men in mind. So that they thought that clergy people would have wives who would be able to take care of children and cook meals while the clergy person is out taking care of the community, while, if your midnight call to a parishioner, that it's fine because the priest's wife can take over. Even to basic things like the design of cassocks and the design of clerical shirts. I mean, even the clothes that we wear have largely been designed for men. And so as a woman trying to find clerical wear that fits and looks and is comfortable and emphasizes what you want emphasized and doesn't emphasize what you don't want emphasized, that in and of itself is a challenge. And then to have that people have a sense of a different way of interacting with women clergy. So that I have had friends who have been told about their hairstyle or their makeup by parishioners, that they would never think to say to a male clergy person, don't you think it's time for a haircut? Or those pants you are wearing are really ugly. But they feel very comfortable telling women clergy how they should look, when they need a new hairdo, or even to say, you're looking very sexy today. I mean, the kind of conversations that people feel comfortable having, the things that they feel comfortable saying to women clergy in and of itself is problematic. And I think that one of the things has to mitigate against all of that has to be the way that we socialize people in the church, that what is the role of a priest and what is the work that a priest is meant to do. And the other nice thing would be if we clergy women could have wives that were not working outside the home, that would be a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. I think that most women in most professions would say that if we were given a partner who did not work outside the home, that it would make many of the challenges we face easier to deal with, and would make people less demanding and less questioning of our ability to do the work that we are called to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Your experiences are so much wisdom, and I am learning so much every single time. Moving on to Linda. How have you worked to create a more inclusive and equitable environment for women in STEM in your community, and what strategies have you found to be most effective?
You'll find that a lot of times when I have an opportunity to speak and share, I mostly just have to center my sharing around the word exposure, right? It's just so important to expose people and expose yourself actually to in the case of introverts, it's a big leap to expose yourself and allow yourself to be the face of STEM, or the face of STEM in this community, the face of STEM in this organization. So, with exposure in mind, I think the first thing I would say is just really showing up for events where you can be seen by people who look like you, who are looking for people who look like you in that environment, and show up as authentically as you can as well in those spaces. It's really important, I think, to show up as you are, so that people can see that I don't necessarily have to fit a certain mold if I want to progress in the STEM field. Similarly, then in the line of exposure is also giving other people a platform. So I have not been disappointed yet by a woman that I have hired. Every single one of them that has joined my team, I'm lucky enough to be able to make those kinds of decisions where I am now. Every single one of them who has joined my team has consistently outperformed, because they go through the same rigor as everyone else in terms of assessing technical capability. And once we give them a platform, once I've given them a platform, they've consistently outperformed. So, that just makes it easier when someone is on the outside looking in. It just makes it easier to say, okay, well, that nothing fell apart. We've had the organization that I serve has had a data office for 3 years. When we started, outside of me, the team was all male. In the 3 years of hiring and changes happening, we're now at 50% representation of each gender. If we thanks, if we also have demonstrated results where, if we just give people access to training, this is now outside of my immediate team. Every time we give people access to training, we start to see that, we start, maybe going back to the earlier question, we start to see breakdown in bias, because we're seeing more women signing up for data related training. And the training that we offer outside of my immediate team doesn't require you to have a STEM background. It really takes you step by step. So, we've got a particular one where we've got robotics developers, and in the same, it's less than 3 years that we've been running that program, but we've also achieved 50% representation outside of my direct team in terms of who now in the greater organization is capacitated to build bots. And so it's really nice to have, for me, it doesn't feel like I've taken some kind of big leap. It just felt natural. And again, we assess capability in all cases before you get the opportunity, but it's been really, really impactful in terms of creating this inclusive environment to be able to demonstrate results. to be able to say year on year, this is the results of making our teams more diverse, upskilling our teams outside of the data office, and making them more diverse. We have direct results to like a financial bottom line. So it's all about exposure. I think being mindful about what we do with that exposure, how we show up, even when it's difficult, and who we give access to. I think, yeah, that's really been a difference maker, and I'm so proud of the results that we have to show for that.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing in your community as well. Anna, what inspired you to pursue a career in architecture, and what motivates you to continue working in this field?
That's quite an easy one. It's I have a lot of architects in my family, going back for quite a few generations, and my father was an architect. I mentioned him earlier. But I think one of the things that really motivated me, and I think is particularly topical for tonight, is I have a photograph of my grandmother. I don't know if you can see, in the early 1930s on a building site in Denmark. So she actually started studying architecture, and she didn't, I don't think, we can't quite work it out, but I think for a few years she studied architecture, and then she left her studies to get married. So I think in a way I've been motivated by her, or almost sort of finishing the job that she started. And even though it's a much easier environment now to be an architect, it's still very tricky as a woman. I think we've all faced hurdles in this front. And it's quite interesting. I was talking to my mother this morning about my grandmother, and she told me that she left architecture school to get married, and actually joined a housewife school, which I was quite stunned by, and then went on to do a course in how to look after babies. So obviously 1930s Denmark, very different world to now. But if you look at the statistics for female or women in architecture, it's pretty shocking. And I think it's something like globally about 17%. I have some stats that I pulled up today. 17% globally are of registered architects are women, and there's a significant fall off from the years of study. So a lot of female or a lot of women start off studying architecture and then drop off. So there's a significant drop off from the earlier stages of the the educational process to the actual practice. And I think, to be honest, it's because it's so tough. It really is so tough to be a woman in such a heavily male-dominated field. We talk about statistics globally, and we talk about the percentages of women that are architects. But then if you look at a building site, for example, you will pretty much almost guaranteed to be 100% male. So not only are you working in an environment where there are very few architects that are female, but you're working in a construction industry which is extremely male dominated. There are very few, I know a few cases of construction firms that are run by women, owned by women, but it's a rarity, and it's something to be celebrated and encouraged. And yeah, I think taking that one step further, it's looking at the numbers of architects that are Black women. For example, in the US, there's only currently 566 registered Black women architects in the US. And in South Africa, I checked some statistics again today. There are, the ones that I could find of 2017, there seem to be only less than 100 registered Black architects, women in South Africa. And I don't know about Eswatini. I tried to find some today. I'm not sure what the numbers are there. But, you can see it's a hugely stereotypical environment. It's a hugely male-dominated environment and industry. However, it's also extremely gratifying. And I think in terms of how to sort of stay on top of it as a woman, And some of the questions that you asked earlier and that others were answering in a similar vein, I would just say that, you know, the proof is in the pudding. Women can do it. Women can and will do it, and we will just become more and more. And you know, the numbers are slowly increasing. I also read somewhere that by 2022 we should be equally represented, so 50% by 2022. That's 200 years from now. If we carry on at the rate we're going, there should be an equal number of women architects. So I'm just going to keep on and hopefully by doing what, you know, what I and other female architects are doing, it shows younger generations that it's more than just possible. It's a fantastic place to be, and we can and we'll do it. So just through example, keeping on.
Thank you so much, Anna. And that is literally a challenge to all the young women here. If you can draw, if you have a passion, I guess it's time to be an architect, guys. There's so much space for us. Let us go and infiltrate all these spaces. Nomfundo, what role do you see for technology and innovation in expanding access to healthcare and achieving universal healthcare coverage? And how can we ensure that all these advances are accessible to all?
Thanks, Owe. Thanks for the question. Yeah, I think, you know, steadily coming out of COVID-19, we've seen a lot of developments and we've seen a lot of investment in telehealth. We do see some investments, some progress in our context, but, you know, it is also going to be dependent on connectivity in the country. So even that access itself right now is something that's incredibly privileged. And that's just not discussing our internet connectivity infrastructure in the country. So absolutely, I think technology can be used to decentralize, make services available in hard to reach areas or from the comfort of your home through outreach services. But again, that's going to be dependent on like connectivity infrastructure, technology access, which right now, like I said, in the country is a matter of privilege.
Thank you. And a question for Fezo. In your view, what are the biggest challenges facing health researchers today? And how can we work to overcome those challenges?
Thank you, Owe. So the first one and the key one is the issue of health equity for health researchers. Our work is largely driven by where the funding is coming from, and you can't really pursue much research without the funds for it. And the problem is that most of the funding is coming from people who aren't immediately affected by the social determinants of health. And so these areas that are supposed to be prioritized aren't really being prioritized. So as a health researcher, it's a bit of a tricky one with juggling how to push the agendas that need to be pushed, but also satisfying the stakeholders and the funders that are, you know, channeling in the funds to where the research should be. So do you ask how those can be solved, or is that all you said? I'm gonna go ahead and, Owe?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. I was gonna go ahead and say that to start working to fix this is to be in these spaces ourselves as health researchers in the disadvantaged groups like women or Black women. You find that a lot of the times women aren't in the leadership roles. So we are starting to take up space in healthcare and health research, but we're not quite at the top. So we're not in the rooms where, you know, the agendas are being made and the priorities are being pointed out. So you find that the issue of gender, which is a huge thing in health research and health equity, is being overlooked. And if there's no women in the room to have this conversation, that's not going to be prioritized, and all the funding goes away from that area. There's also another issue facing health researchers is this area or the age of information, the TikTok and the Twitters, where it's one thing to be conducting research with facts and science, and it's another to get on TikTok and find someone has made a 10-second video with a conspiracy theory, and then it runs. So it's a tricky one as well with that. But all we can do is keep pushing the research and keep churning out the information and try and get ahead of the conspiracy theories and the age of information. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mali. This one's for you. How do you approach working with stakeholders from diverse backgrounds and cultures? And what strategies have you found to be most effective in building productive relationships with stakeholders?
That's a really great question. And there's very many ways to answer that. But one example that comes to mind, and this comes from my previous work in DC. So I guess working, with in a male-dominated industry, like one thing I noticed, like just the capacity that I guess men have to just like push through work, like and maybe not ever like not take lunch breaks, or like we'll be in meetings for like hours and hours with like different stakeholders, and I could tell other people are hungry because I was feeling hungry. So one thing I remember kind of just bringing into the workspace was having lunches brought into the meetings while we're having meetings, and that totally changed how we were like conducting meetings and the results from that, and just being aware that we're having meetings with different stakeholders, so we also tailored depending on where like people were coming, customers were coming from. So if we had, for example, a meeting with maybe Japanese people, will have a different thing on the menu, as opposed to if they were American, then sandwiches were okay. But just not being afraid to, I guess, bring my like female intuition into that, and just making that, and that was very much appreciated. And that's something I definitely found out, that I guess working in a male dominated industry, like especially as women, like don't be afraid to bring in that womanly touch sometimes, because it's men just don't think about that all the time. And then once I brought that up, for example, that was very much appreciated. And somebody even said like, thank you for raising that, because we were always hungry, but nobody would say anything. And then but generally in terms of stakeholder management, another part of that was, for example, when we had like customers come in, one of the things to do was after work, all the guys would like, go out for drinks or whatever. And I'm not the biggest drinker, so I wouldn't participate in that. But find other ways to build customer relationship without having to like go out and stay up all night and try to be productive the next day. So I think it's really, especially as women, because we want to be like go and give you 100%, but sometimes you just don't have the energy, and it's really respecting that and knowing how you work and trying to work around that. So that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. My next question is directed to Nomfundo. Can you recall a challenge you faced in your male-dominated industry?
Any challenge? Wow. Well, first of all, I think one of the greatest challenges that I've faced in the male-dominated industry starts from training itself. So even in college level, just walking into classes where you have like 32 students and only 8 of them are women, it's like, oh, this is this is interesting. But I think I really walked into those rooms with a lot of confidence, and I can definitely draw that back from my WK times. I think we were really fortunate to have teachers and communities that really believed in us and believed in our potential and capacity to serve. And so I think just drawing it on from those lessons and those principles sort of made me walk into these rooms with a lot of confidence and believed that I did deserve to be there, and the work that I was doing there was, above and beyond me, and it was a calling to serve. So, all these intimidations and all these side things that come from the side are just a distraction. I think one of the panelists, Linda, spoke about that. It's a distraction. I'm here to serve and I need to do this. So, it's either you come with me or you move out of my way, or, I find an ally so you can move out of my way. Sure.
Thank you. And my next question is directed to Reverend Nondombi and Mali. How have your experiences as Black women in male-dominated workforces influenced your career path, and what strategies have you found most effective in advancing in your career?
So for me, my career they have in the clergy, they have something that they call second career clergy. So that's people who have done something else and then become clergy. I'm about a 10th career clergy. So my pathway to the priesthood has been what I term the long and winding road. And I started off as an economist, which was also a very male-dominated area, and I discovered that that one of the key things for me was having a support system, and it didn't necessarily have to be a support system in my workplace. So recognizing that often in our workplaces, support is not there. In fact, people are often looking for you to fail, especially when you're when you're one of the very few or one of the first. So, so having a support system that is outside the particular area that I was working in, and having particularly women who were experiencing, even in different fields, right? So that knowing that I'm not crazy when I say, can you believe that these men actually said this with me in the room? And having women who were scientists, who were professors, who were, all of these different things, to be having those conversations that, no, you're not crazy. And to be encouraging at the times when I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing here? This is ridiculous. Why would I be putting myself in a situation where I am banging my head against a wall so much of my time? But having people who are encouraging in saying, hey, that was my day as well. And then also remembering that many of the men, particularly in different fields that I've been in, is that looking at the men who you are working alongside and realizing that mediocrity is actually their goal, and that they are making it as mediocre workers. And so that to give myself then the time when I'm feeling like I have to strive to be perfect, that hell no. There are days when I am going to be mediocre and claim it as my right in this place, that if I am working alongside men for whom being mediocre is fine to elevate them in the career path, then I can have 2 or 3 days of mediocrity and be quite okay with that.
Yes. Can you please rephrase the question or ask it again? I just don't want to miss a point.
Yes, so the question was, how have your experiences as a Black woman in a male-dominated workforce influenced your career path, and what strategies have you found most effective in advancing your career?
Okay, well, I'll talk mostly about the strategy. I think it's just using my network, and whether that's within the, well, I guess mostly within the organization, and really finding out who makes the decision, like, you know, and because sometimes, a lot of the times, the decisions that are being made about you're usually not in the room. So you always, I read this amazing book by, I think, Kamhlaba Harris, and she talks about like winning in the workplace by having sponsors or within the organization, basically speaking on your behalf, especially when you're not in the room, when decisions about raises or bonuses are being made, or promotions and stuff. And the way I've gone about that is then building the network within the organizations, because a lot of the time, to be honest, and I think Reverend also touched on this, is yes, work hard, but it's working more strategically, doing the work, and also how you sell the work. Like, it's no use, but putting in all the hours, but nobody knows about it, because either the right people don't hear about it, or when they have outings, maybe you are not there, or you weren't invited. So it's finding time and finding those key people to really show, highlight your work and what you've been doing, and really selling yourself. So that's been my strategy, and that's worked a lot. But just keeping your network, and it doesn't even have to be like with your network, like meeting the same person every that often, but just when something major happens, share that, and then just have them in the back of your, make sure you are in the back of their mind. So when this important decisions are being made, your name comes up. In terms of strategy, that would be it. And in terms of being a Black woman, and I mean, I never know how to answer that, because I've been a Black woman everywhere, so I just kind of just show up. So.
Thank you so much. And the next question is for Linda and Anna. What role do you see for allyship and advocacy in promoting diversity and inclusion in the workplace? And how have you worked to build allyship and advocacy networks within your own career?
I love this question. Can I go first, Anna? It's a really spicy question, actually, which is why I like it so much. And here's the thing about it, is that I think we intuitively, and I have experiences that back this up, we intuitively understand that while we are in a transition from mostly patriarchal societies, in most parts of the world, we are still there. Maybe if we speak Eswatini specifically, we might find that we are higher on the scale. So this idea of allyship, real and true allies, is really, really key, because what that means is that men really are only listening to other men, right? All of this exposure that I spoke about earlier is not always well received, depending on your platform, etc. So it's actually impactful in terms of just shifting us through this transition that I spoke about, to a more equitable world. Loved Fezile's comment actually in the chat about, we all can't wait until we're past this, until it doesn't matter, until gender doesn't matter. But until we get there, there's a strong need for allyship, right? Really, really a strong need for allyship. We can speak a lot about how draining it is to build allies, in terms of gender equality, because most of the time, like we're saying, we just want to do the work. And yet you have to garner support, you have to have people who are sort of willing to echo your opinions. Just this week I was in a meeting, and someone said, you know what, I hear everything that you're saying. I'm just going to have this one-on-one with this other person, and this other person, we had started with an engagement with this person X, and because person X is male, someone said, I hear you, let me just get their opinion before I give mine. So critical, really, this idea of allyship, so that when this person Y goes to person X is like, they said what they said, can we move on? You know what I mean? Say for it being, unfortunately, an additional step to us getting work done, to us moving ideas and innovations forward, it is necessary. Again, I think just important for us to not make it everything, to not make it the whole story, and make sure that we are still delivering, as I said, with all the confidence that I have in women and women leaders.
So yeah, I hope I understood the question. You were talking about the issue of the allies, and specifically with male advocates. Is that what you were asking?
Yes, around that, yes.
Yeah, I think in response to that, I think once again, just that notion of just keeping on and sort of showing through, leading by example, and showing men, those particularly that have doubts about women in these sorts of positions, that they have no reason to have the doubts, and that through just through the progress of let's say, for example, on a building site or on a project where there are various stages, the deadlines are met, the emails are answered, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted, and there are no balls dropped. I think that's where one, as a woman, one can just illustrate that we are more than capable. And as time goes by, it just through example prove that there is faith and trust to be had. And I think through that, a certain amount of respect does come eventually. I think it does take a while. And, you know, in my experience, I've had a lot of, I was referring to the sort of all male building sites, which as a sort of 20-something recent graduate, I would find myself on a building site and be faced with these rather kind of portly foremen who would look at me with a sort of smirk on their faces. And it was always very frustrating, because I would be in a position where I had to give instructions and they needed to listen to me, otherwise the project would fall apart. And, you know, I'd be giving instructions to these sort of, I don't know, particular certain type of man. And they would look at me with a little bit of a kind of smirk, as if to say, oh, you know, how cute she is, like, so these things that are coming out of her mouth, like, what is she actually even saying of any importance? And I think quite sadly, it ended up with me becoming quite nasty, and I had to become quite tough on site. And in a way, it's kind of counterproductive, because you sort of feel like, in some instances, you feel like you're becoming more masculine. And I think that that's something we need to also be wary of, that we kind of, you know, that we sort of become, I don't know, Thatcherite or whatever the word might be. But, you know, there's a fine balance to garnering respect on a building site and getting therefore developing and promoting more allyship. So it's quite a difficult one, and I think it does take a lot of time. And I think hopefully these days, I mean, I've been in this industry for decades, more than 3 decades now. So I'm hoping that by now the building site scenario, younger generations of female architects are not facing quite the same sort of stereotypical assumptions about their capabilities and their brains. And I think just, you know, promote safety on site as well. And I mean that from a sexual harassment point of view. Obviously, as a woman in a building site where there are so few females, or there's just a sort of a large body of potentially, well, I wouldn't say potentially hostile, but in certain circumstances, it could be seen as quite a dangerous place for a woman to be alone. And I think, not that I've had that experience myself in on site, but I have had it in the workplace for sure. So to promote safety on site, safety for a single woman alone in a male-dominated workplace is also extremely important. I can't really say other than just sort of keeping on at it and proving that once again, we are extremely capable and outshine the men in many cases. So
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Fezo, what do you think is the most significant barrier for women in your field, and how can we overcome those barriers?
Thank you, Owe. Before I go on, can I take 2 seconds to honor the most important woman, my mother? Hi, Mom. So in my field, I think it's the lack of representation. I can't explain how important it is to see someone who looks like you in the spaces that you're in. And as you navigate, start off as a scientist and you're growing in the field, you start to see that there aren't many people that look like you. And so seeing someone who is Black and a woman taking up space. For example, I gravitate towards such people. I'm happy to see Sbongile here because she's someone that I've gravitated towards. To say, I see you as an older woman in my space, in my field, and for her to reach out and bring me in takes away those barriers. And what I'm doing is trying to pay that forward as well to younger scientists. So when you see little drawings of Black female scientists holding like a test tube or something, those are the things that need to be done to remove this barrier of not seeing yourself in these spaces, because that does a lot for, making you believe or not believe if you're capable of doing something. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. That wraps up the questions from my side. And now the floor is open. And the audience have a few questions. I will read one of them to the speakers. Since you started your careers, have there been any improvements in your work environment that you have experienced? Please give examples. And secondly, what did you get away with because you were female? So 2-part question, and the floor is open for whoever would like to answer that one.
I can start, and I think my answer will also kind of touch on the last question I was asked that I thought was such a good question, and about breaking some of the barriers. I think working from home, if you have the privilege to, has been and will be the biggest game changer, I think, especially for women in a lot of these male-dominated industries. Just speaking from working in energy in general, one of the first things that became very clear to me was, yes, there's a lot of male in these industries, but they also a lot of maybe their partners, or they had a lot of support at home, and so either whether they were the only people working, so they had wives at home that weren't working, so they had a lot of support from home. And I think, I don't want to stereotype, but I think the way women work in general, we just work different than men, and so to have the ability to work from home, I think has been the biggest game changer, because I think for women, we're also able to be more flexible because of that, and that's totally been a game changer. And I think that's going to invite a lot more women also in a lot of these male-dominated industries. So I think that was the first part of the question. But yes, I'll just add that.
Thank you. I will repeat the question for anyone who wants to answer it. Since you've started your careers, have there been any improvements in your work environment that you've experienced? Please give examples. And secondly, what did you get away with because you were female?
If I can take the first one, so I would say the improvements aren't necessarily in terms of gender representation, but it is sort of thinking about the gender lens and incorporate it into the actual work we do. So diversity and inclusion isn't seen as an add-on like checkbox, but it's seen as like, how do we ensure that we include diversity and inclusion in health financing? How does it actually, affect the work or affect access to healthcare? How does, toxic masculinity result in, how does it affect health-seeking behaviors, and how do we ensure we reach out to anyone who's being affected? So it's just applying the gender lens to the actual work and seeing it as an add-on to like improve our performance as opposed to like a checklist. And then the second question, I don't think I've gotten away with anything because I was female, but I do think that adding this sort of lens into our work does make people sit up and listen closer when I speak, because now they're thinking, oh, gender lens, social norms, because they're actually doing the work themselves. It's not like me preaching or me like trying to advocate for myself, but it's like they actually have to do the work to understand various points of views.
Can I jump in on the second part of the question about what we get away with? And this was sparked actually by a male member of our EXCO who said to me, you know what, this is actually great that you're now at this table, because it's awkward for us sometimes to be able to put forward females to sponsor females effectively, to sponsor women in their careers. So he was like, this is actually great because now you can sort of speak on that when the forum comes up. And I just thought, what a difficult position people are in, but it's been really gratifying to be able to put names forward and have people considered in a different light, without any tension around what the dynamics are, what the gender dynamics are between those people. So nothing particularly fun, unfortunately. I think we still get held to the same standard, but an important opportunity to say, actually, have you considered so-and-so? Have you considered X, Y, or Z?
Thank you so much. Also, just because we are recording, we would like to thank Reverend Dudu, who was able to give us time in her day and be a part of the speaker series. Unfortunately, she's gone now, but thank you so much. And the next question for whoever is willing to attempt it is, to all the speakers, what do you do in your personal roles as wives, mothers, sisters, aunts, friends, maybe, to promote girls to feel that they can achieve anything they want to? Yes, Anna, you can unmute.
I would love to answer that because I have two Waterford Kamhlaba alumni children, and I have currently a son at Waterford. So my two eldest children are happy results of Waterford, and I think a combination of perhaps having my sort of grandmother's story and then generations later, that feeling of carrying on the mission, keeping the mission going, my mother's also quite a staunch feminist, and I think each generation as we go by, as each generation is introduced to these themes, it becomes the story continues, And I'm also I just wanted to quickly put in an add that I'm so pleased to see and meet you, other Waterfordians, Waterford Kamhlaba alumni, because I can see the strength that has come out of the school. And, you know, the role models are here. We have so many wonderful role models. And I think just to keep that going. And I do have this joke with my children that, you know, because there is a sort of strong hereditary nature to architects and engineers, it seems like they are the most sort of inherited careers, professions. I always say to my children, which one's going to be the architect? And they were, unfortunately, none of them have taken the bait. But certainly upholding these ideals and keeping the mission going to defend and support women's rights and women's presence in every single profession. Because if you actually think about it, you know, I'm thinking of architecture per se, but when you think about the majority of professions are male dominated, so it's quite difficult to actually find professions that are not male dominated. So, you know, really showing that in every workplace, in every environment, in every profession, it needs to be, equality needs to be achieved and aimed for. So that's how I'm hoping my children, the next generation, well, they certainly do seem to be taking it on. So I think that was that the question? I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, it was. Thank you. Anyone else?
I think I'll share my own little contribution that I have. There's a lot nowadays, there's a lot of women-centered scholarships, and this is all in a bit of trying to, you know, increase women involvement in science. So when I come across those, I try to pass them forward to the women that I think would be eligible. And I remember having recently a conversation with a guy who was saying that, you know, it's enough now. You know, there's always women first, women scholarships and whatnot. You know, it's enough now. Surely we've done the work. And I just had to be like, because you don't realize that there actually is still a huge, huge gap, I will continue to recommend women for scholarships and pass them forward. So yeah, that's the small thing that I can do as an early career researcher myself, is just to pass things forward.
Anyone else want to attempt that question? All right then. Now, I think we have one more question directed to Mali. They say that you said you were able to use the status of being a minority in your industry to your advantage. Can you expand on that?
Yes. No, so I guess what I meant by that was, I think a lot of the time people, when you say, oh, I'm the minority, or I always think it's an advantage because either people have stereotypes about you or they don't really know what to expect. So you can almost, at least the way it's shown up for me, I had to define every time what that looks like. And so a lot of the time it's like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not the first Black person they've met, but sometimes I'm the first person from Sierra Leone they've met. And I always say, oh, that's a good news, because when you hear about Sierra Leone, it's, you know, never for something good. So when someone tells me, oh, you're the first person, da, 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 I'm always excited, because then I really get to show them how I really get to show them another side. So that's really what I meant by that. Like, sometimes, you know, being the minority, you know, I always see it as an advantage, because yeah, you can then show up how you want, and if people had stereotypes, it's also easy to break those stereotypes, because a lot of the time those stereotypes are also based on such a fixed story that it's really easy to break them once, you know, you really get to show them who you are. So that's what I meant by that.
Thank you so much, everyone. We have reached the end of our question and answer session and also the end of our speaker series. Well, not really. There's still 10 minutes to mingle with all the participants. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And to all the people who attended today, we appreciate you so much. I certainly learned a lot, and I think everyone else did. And like you were all saying, representation matters, and we hope to see more women in these spaces. And I am seeing so many women in the spaces I want to be in. So thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much for honoring us and honoring the invitation and giving us so much wisdom. We've learned so much. We are so grateful. And to everyone here, I believe that you all had a good time. Now, as you can see, right on my screen, we have our 60th logo. And today we begin the countdown to our 60th celebration. So save the date for the 29th of July. We are turning 60. I mean, we are 60 already. So please, alums, save the date, and we cannot wait to see you. 60th celebration coming up soon, 4 months till then. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And thank you so much for spending time with us until the next speaker series. Thank you so much. And now we would like to open the space for mingling. And I see Sita has their hand raised. So you officially have the floor. And I am cutting the recording now. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say thank you to all the speakers. It was really great to hear you all talk about your various occupations. Obviously, I'm biased because my sister's here. Go, Molly. It's just such an honor to see the people